This is my fiancée, Katie. And this is me, Rick, her almost ex-boyfriend and former porn addict of 25 years. In today's episode, I interview Katie about our story and the painful 3-year process it took for me to break an unrealized addiction of 25 years. So let's dive in.
It makes me hurt inside to think about you experiencing that with other people. That isn't me.
I have with me today my beautiful fiancée, Katie Johnson. Thank you so much for joining me again.
You're very welcome.
Today, we get to switch roles. I get to be the one putting you in the hot seat, asking the questions.
Yes.
I think that the last episode, part 1 of this series, I felt really good about being able to explain things from the man's perspective and help to just give some insight as to what some of the different challenges were on my side of things.
Yes.
But it's such an oversight to know how many women are out there who aren't being validated for their side of the experience. And I think that's one of the biggest things that you and I have done really well, is being able to also acknowledge the difficulties of what it is that you're going through.
Yeah.
Because this is definitely a two-sided thing. When you're working on something like recovering from porn addiction, it's not just the man. It's literally the man and the woman, or the man and their partner are doing it together. It's not a one-person thing. It's completely 100% two people working on it together. The man can do everything that he possibly needs to do, but if the woman also isn't doing work on herself, then it's never going to work.
It's true. Yeah, because it's a relationship. And relationships are always about both partners giving 100%. Absolutely. So it is a journey together. And kind of what you ended with last time on the last episode, you explained that necessarily it needs to be primarily the man that's, getting a lot of the focus because it's his addiction.
Right.
But in that, it can be also hard for the woman to feel like there isn't any focus going to what she's going through. And it really is, I believe, the most painful experience to go through something like this, where you're not really being understood. The things you're experiencing are not being felt by the partner who's doing the things that are so hurtful and harmful to them. So I think that this episode is really, really valuable and important to do, because it's going to help a lot of women who are going through this to know that they're not alone, and that their feelings are valid, and that there are people that care and understand what it is that they're going through.
Absolutely. And one of my hopes too is that a lot of men will be able to watch this with their significant other, so that they can really understand what it is that their partner is going through, just to help to give them different things to be thinking about while they're going through their process, and being able to relate, like, what are the things that I'm going through, communicating to my partner, how's that going to affect them, and how am I going to properly support them. Getting into our relationship, you kind of had to warm up to me. You didn't really, full disclosure, I did get turned down for a second date when we first started dating. So it did take her a while to warm up to me. But I think that we've got really great chemistry together, and ultimately the bond that we had with what it was that we were looking for in a relationship with a significant other, I think that our values are really what drove us together.
I'd agree.
But
it took me a while to see that, but yes. I just had a lot of walls and guards up, understandably.
For good reason.
I had been through before.
Yeah, definitely. And based on the very first message that I had sent you.
Right.
Yeah, it made a lot of sense. You're like, hey, this guy might be a little too honest.
Yeah.
Wasn't ready for that.
Definitely.
Yeah. So definitely brought up some guards.
Yeah, it took me a little while to get to that point, but when I was there and I was really seeing, like, okay, I really feel like I might be able to see myself with this guy long term. I was definitely hoping for real closeness, real intimacy, where I felt like I could be real and vulnerable, that I could trust you, that I was getting honesty from you, and that I could trust that my reality was real, that the person I was with was really who he appeared to be. I also, as far as, like sexual intimacy, I really wanted to feel seen. I wanted to feel attractive. I wanted to be noticed. I wanted to be the one that was able to turn you on and enjoy, making you feel certain things that I wanted to be the only one making you feel. Exclusivity and just trust to be able to be the one, the one that you chose.
It is so difficult for me to hear you say these things and to be able to relate to you now. But when I look at myself 4.5 years ago when we first met, and throughout the process, you telling me and explaining to me these different things about what your different expectations were in a relationship, I was just kind of like, huh?
Really?
Like,
I remember explaining
there
some
were
of these
some
things to
there
you.
were some things that connected as far as like emotional closeness and wanting to have a true relationship where you're just 100% vulnerable and authentic with a person, and creating a relationship that lasts a lifetime. But I had really no idea what that looked like, and because of the experiences that I had, I never had any other woman in a relationship communicate to me before the importance of her being the one that was drawing all of my sexual energy and attention towards her, her being the one to fulfill all of the desires that she had within a relationship, which is completely normal under the appropriate circumstances where somebody's actually taught you what a healthy relationship looks like. But I think that for the majority of the people that are watching this, that's not the case. They didn't have that experience of having somebody teach them what does it look like to have a healthy relationship.
Yeah, if they're watching this, then that likely is probably true.
What were some of the different experiences that you had in life that showed you prior to our relationship and kind of set the expectations for what it was that you were looking for?
I remember you asking me that question even early on in our relationship, when I would tell you the things that, I thought made a healthy relationship. And you asked me, like, where did your ideas of these things come from? And I thought that was just so odd, because it seems so natural for me to have this picture in my mind of what it would be like to have the healthy, ideal relationship. And, looking back, I think that where these things really came from probably were from, some movies, but mostly I'd say from my church experience, my church background, because there was a lot of focus on marriage and relationships. And so, when I was in church, I was in church every single weekend, and lots of talk was about having a healthy marriage and being a good partner to your spouse, faithfulness. And so I went to marriage retreats too. And then, of course, due to a lot of the issues that I did have in my previous relationship, I also had read lots and lots and lots of books on marriage and healthy relationships. So that's probably where a lot of that came from. I'd also say that, after being in an unhealthy relationship, very, very unhealthy relationship for many, many years, I will say that I think I forgot or didn't really believe that some of the ideals I had in my mind were even possible anymore. And I let them go. And I don't even know that I really believed that any of the things I really wanted was possible. And where I got, and this sounds kind of funny, but where I got the picture in my brain that maybe this is something that is real and out there is the show This Is Us. And I just remember the feeling watching that, where I saw the interaction between the couples in that show and the way that they loved each other and the way that the men treated the woman. And, they weren't perfect. And that's what I liked about the show, is it really wasn't this romantic idealism. It really, to me, it didn't seem the same as a lot of the movies that are 2 hours long, where you just see, you know, the most romanticized version of love, right? This seemed like a lot more realistic version of what love could be like.
Definitely.
And the interactions and the relationships that I saw between the men and the women in there, it was like, wow, there could be men like that in this world. And it wasn't just one couple. It was all the couples in there.
Right.
And it gave me something to seek. It gave me something to want again. And so coming into our relationship, I actually made you watch that show with me.
I don't think you made me. I want to say that I was a willing participant.
You were a willing participant.
I really enjoy that
surprised.
show. I'm actually extremely sad that it's over.
Oh, I know. Me too. I'm like, oh, why can't they just keep going forever?
Yeah.
It's so good.
Come on. This needs to be like The Young and the Restless. This is way more important.
But not.
This is way more important. I think that it's really important that you touched on the point of what it was that you didn't even believe anymore was attainable or possible.
Yeah.
Like, it can be very detrimental to anybody's mindset, whether it's a man or a woman, based on the experience that they've personally had, that show them what my expectations were is nothing like what I actually got.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that it's not possible to attain the things that you're looking for. It just means that you need to figure out the roadmap of how to get there.
Yes. And what's really fascinating about saying that, I'm glad you mentioned that, is that, you know, I was recently listening to a podcast where she was talking about belief, and you will not believe something's possible that you've never seen. She mentioned something about like somebody that is invited to go to Hawaii, and they're like, well, if they've never even seen pictures of Hawaii, or they've never even seen what an island looks like, and the person talks to them about what is Hawaii,
yeah,
they're going to be like, the land ends and there's water around the whole thing and it's tropical, and like they've never seen palm trees. And just imagine being told what an island is like when you've never seen it or even seen pictures of it. It's hard to believe it's even real.
Yeah.
And I think that goes the same with things like this, where if you haven't seen an example of a healthy relationship,
right,
you're going to have a very hard time being able to believe that that's actually possible for you.
I know that you have mentioned that there was a few relationships from your past experience where you looked at the relationships and you thought more like, well, that's the type of relationship that I would like to have.
Would say I'd seen some that I would think have a great relationship, and some I later found out didn't really have a great relationship, and it was all a front. So, and I would be included in that. But I think that I had examples that I thought people had a great relationship, and it made me want that.
I'm really glad that This Is Us gave you some hope for the type of relationship that what you believed was attainable. And
Same.
I'm glad that you introduced me to that show and helped to give me some different examples of what it looks like to be able to reach out, be vulnerable, admit mistakes, take responsibility, have conversations, make the time to connect with your partner. So I haven't heard you mention anything in your first two answers about pornography, but I do know from personal experience through our conversations that you definitely had a relationship where you did use pornography in an attempt to enhance the relationship. So I'm curious to know, when you did use porn to enhance your relationship, did it give you any of the things that you were looking for? Did it give you increased confidence, trust, emotional closeness, feeling like you were being sexually desired? Did it make you feel any of those things? And if not, then how did it make you feel?
No. When you're a little girl and you're dreaming about what it's going to be like when you find the one, when you find your life partner, never in that fantasy of mine did I imagine hoping to find a partner who would be masturbating to images of other women.
Yeah.
That was never part of my plan, and so I think it's really important to kind of give a little more context as to why I even was open to the possibility of using pornography as a relationship enhancer.
Yeah, why don't you share a little bit more with us?
You go from somebody who was very involved in church, very much against pornography, had strong values against it. And then you go to somebody who is completely fine with it and even using it as a relationship enhancer. And that's a big gap to bridge.
Yeah.
And I think that basically there's a lot of backstory, but I think that the easiest way to explain it is that it was really over time, a gradual process, and it had to do with a few different things. One, that society, is so so okay with this, and you're a minority if you're not.
Right.
And then you've got, even some religious people that are saying, oh yeah, it's not a problem, it's totally fine, and it depends on what religious circle you're in. And so we would become a part of the religious circle where it was much more acceptable. Plus, I also had been, I believe, slowly groomed over time to be more and more okay with this. And that was for the purpose of me doing more of the actions that were in pornography with my partner, who wanted to do these things, though I was uncomfortable with these things. It was a way to get me more comfortable with the possibility of doing them with him.
Right.
With all that to say that it was an enhancer, though, you asked the question, is there any way that it actually was an enhancer for my relationship? And at the time, there were certain things I thought it was enhancing. I thought it was enhancing my ability to know my partner better, to know what it was that turned him on, and to be more really open with each other and vulnerable so that we could be real and be more of ourselves.
Yeah.
But I think that was a perspective that wasn't accurate when I understand, the real full context of what was going on and what an actual relationship looks like without pornography that is also very open, vulnerable, and being able to share what turns each other on. And it doesn't have to do with other people and wanting other people besides our partner, So it also made me feel like I was competing with these things. Never in the relationship where I was using pornography as an enhancer did I actually feel better about myself. I felt tremendously worse about myself. I felt constantly inadequate, and that I was never measuring up to the things that we were seeing together.
It's interesting because I think that there's probably some other women out there or other couples out there who say, well, we have used pornography and it has been a benefit to our relationship. I think one of the most important things to focus on with what you just said there is, does it stand the test of time? And in order to have the full context, you really do need it to have the test of time, to be able to evaluate, is it actually giving me these things that I want in my relationship? Or was there a temporary moment in time in which it seemed like it did?
Right.
But it really wasn't.
What's the trajectory?
The beginning of our relationship, I was very open with you about the fact that I did use pornography, but at that time, I don't think either one of us really actually understood and knew the depth of which I was actually addicted to porn. And not just like a small addiction, like a 22-year-long addiction. And as I look back on that, and I just look at, like, once I started to open up to you, one of the things that I never really connected with in the moment was, I wonder how this is making her feel right now. So from your perspective, what does it feel like when your partner tells you, I think that the reason that I'm not coming on to you as much is because I'm watching pornography. I'm watching all these other women, and so I don't think I'm as interested.
Yeah, it was extremely hard to hear that, extremely painful. Yet at the same time, I want to give you a lot of credit for being willing to speak that truth, because that must have been extremely hard for you to be willing to admit that. And I don't think, unfortunately, I don't think that most women find out this way. I think most women feel these things as a result of discovering it, and then being also adding all of that pain there's more pain to be added because of the betrayal and the lies, sometimes years and years and years of it.
Right.
So, first and foremost, I want to thank you so much for being honest about that. That didn't make it easy. Didn't make it easy at all.
No.
So the way that it felt for me, I had worked so hard at that point in my life to be where I was in order to feel good about myself. I had lost 100 pounds. I had been in a relationship where no matter what I did, I wasn't enough. I had been with an unfaithful partner in the past. I had fought tooth and nail to have any self-worth and self-esteem at that point. And I finally had it. When we met, I was finally feeling good about myself.
You're very confident. I love that about you.
Oh, thank you. But, it didn't, I would say though, that once I found out that my suspicions were right about why you weren't attracted to me, or showing that you were as attracted to me anymore.
Yeah.
And, I was noticing that you weren't coming on to me as much. And I was noticing that when I would come down the stairs and something I had prepared for the last hour to get ready to go on a date with you or whatnot, that you weren't impressed. And it hurt so much. And then to hear that it had to do with because you were using pornography, crushed my self-worth and self-esteem again. It brought me right back to that old version of myself mentally that wasn't good enough.
Right.
And I felt invisible again.
And just hearing you talk through those things and reflecting on how much I was drawn to your confidence and how much that decreased, I have to be the one to take the responsibility for that decrease. And I think that may be something that other men, whether or not they're aware of it, might be placing the blame on the partner. Like, well, you used to be a lot more confident, and that's what draws me to you, and I don't have that anymore. Why the hell do you think she doesn't have it? Because you just told her, or she just found out that you're cheating on her. You tell somebody the reason that we're not being as close intimately together, I'm not coming on to you as much, and I'm not as sexually attracted to you anymore. The reason for that is because I'm sleeping with other women, whether that's physically or psychologically. It feels the exact same, right?
It really does. That's the reality of it. And I think that most men think that it's different.
I really want to focus in on the way that it felt for you, because I know that there's probably going to be a lot of partners out there who are addicted that maybe not able to fully understand or believe that it could possibly feel the same to have a real life infidelity occur and have that feel the same way as if it were a psychological.
Yeah, it does feel the same. And I would actually argue with you and say that virtual infidelity isn't just psychological infidelity. It is physical infidelity as well. All the same sensations are being felt in the body.
You're still performing the actions physically.
You're still performing the actions, even if the only one person is actually present for it. The other person is present. They're just on the other side of a screen. And you can get into the details of, well, what is it that makes it not cheating then? Is it that there's a piece of glass between you? Is it that it's live at the moment? Because if that were happening live at the moment, then maybe you'd probably consider it cheating. But since it's recorded, it's not actually cheating. Like, there's all kinds of nuances that you can nitpick here. But the real reality is that you are not being faithful to your partner. And that's what your partner feels.
Right.
Your partner feels cheated on because you're cheating on them.
Exactly. Thank you for confirming that. I think that it's really important for men to understand that, to really get it, to really get their partner's pain, to see how it actually feels for them, to be able to understand what it's like for them to feel cheated on, because that's exactly what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're just asking the wrong questions, if you have to be asking these questions, is this cheating? Is this cheating? It's just the wrong question to be asking. The question to ask is this faithful?
Right.
Is this making my partner feel loved? Is this exclusivity? Is this the partnership that I want to actually have with them?
Right.
Like, those are the questions that need to be asked. It's just the wrong question. It's like saying, how close can I get to this fire without being burned? That's not the question I want to ask. Or how close can I get to the cliff without falling off? No, let's just focus on walking as far away from that cliff as possible, because what we actually want is over here. It's not over the cliff.
Based on all of your experiences in both types of relationships, would you say that porn is more of a relationship enhancer or a relationship silent killer?
I would absolutely say that pornography is bad for relationships, and it is a silent killer. It's something that is not being taken seriously. It's something that's not being talked about enough. And there's a lot of beliefs that are formed on lack of real evidence and lack of science to understand it. That's my personal opinion. But my opinion is based on a lot of research and a lot of experience myself. You know, we can look at scientific evidence and see that pornography is very much just like a drug. It is doing the same thing to the brain that drugs do. It is actually rewiring the brain, and it is desensitizing the brain to stimulus. So it is affecting your relationship negatively, whether you want it to be or not, however you feel about pornography, it doesn't matter. It doesn't differentiate. Your feelings don't play a part in how things affect your brain. If you're regularly using pornography, you are likely going to be needing more of it. You're going to be needing more variety. You're going to be needing things that are more intense, more aggressive, and that keeps progressing on and on and on. It is not something that just stays the same.
Right. A lot of people probably want to debate the nuances of pornography, but if there's one thing for certain, it's that you can't debate the physical changes that are actually occurring within yourself.
Pornography is tainting our view of normal sexuality. That's just the facts. It's something scientifically that can be proven. It is not just a perspective. It is actually literally proven that it is shaping and tainting our view of sexuality. For a lot of people growing up, even like yourself that you talked about, it's the teacher of sexuality, right? I mean, these things are not being talked about in school. The dangers of pornography aren't being talked about. The real sex education isn't happening in school. So where is it that kids are getting their idea of what sexuality is like? It's coming from this stuff. And so whether you like it or not, again, it's tainting how you see sexuality. It is desensitizing you to normal experiences. It's actually affecting your dopamine receptors, because this is not a normal stimulus. This is a super normal stimulus. So it's not actually something that your brain is normal. It's not the normal type of stimulus your brain is used to handling. So it actually has to compensate for that.
There's no real life experience that you can have with your partner that's going to give you anywhere near the amount of pleasure that you can get from pornography.
That's going to hurt women to hear that a lot. I'm feeling angry right now. The statement you just said actually makes me very angry, because that's what we're having to compete with. You just said that you will never, ever experience the level of pleasure with a real person that you can get with pornography, and that sucks.
It's damaging.
It's extremely damaging, because we feel like, why try?
This is what it does to partners.
And what am I even worth to you?
Exactly. That's why it's important. Your partner does mean the world to you. You want them to feel exclusive and loved. That's why you get rid of this thing.
Because I don't want to have to compete with that. And I don't want to not feel good enough for you. It makes me hurt inside to think about you experiencing that with other people. That isn't me.
The hardest things for my process was because of the impact that pornography does have on the brain, and because of the extended time that I used it, I believe that that played a large role in my ability to have compassion and empathy, which is something scientifically that is proven to be shown with pornography use. And even now, even though I'm on the side of, overcoming the addiction, I still can't feel the pain like I want to. I can know, and I do, I can feel it. I can feel the injustice that you're feeling, but I can't feel it like you can feel it. And I feel like the closer that men can get to really understanding how deeply that cuts and hurts the woman, to know that they're not the one, they're not being chosen, they're not the prize.
Right. I said that to you many times in our process. I said, I'm not the prize. I plan to get super.
Yeah. Thank you for being real.
You're welcome.
Love you.
I love you too. I appreciate you trying to feel the pain, even if you can't fully. I appreciate you. I had more.
All right, we're done.
I didn't expect to get super emotional, and I'm tempted to say I'm sorry, but I know that from experience and all the personal development I've been doing on myself in this process, that it's absolutely okay to feel what I'm feeling, and it's understandable, and all feelings are valid. And especially because your opinions are different, or one person can't understand it the same. When I would say something about the way I was feeling, it wasn't okay to be feeling that way. And I did feel like something was wrong with me for the way I felt.
Right.
Which is never how you have made me feel. And I appreciate that very, very much. But yeah, I mean, the emotions are strong for a reason. The way I'm feeling is there for a reason. And the trigger was there as you were talking for a reason.
Yeah.
And it's really important that I think couples understand that they both need to be validated. They both, when they're working through this in this process, it's very important that each person in the couple is validated for what they're experiencing.
Yeah, 100%. It's such a evil thing to have in the middle of two people who are committed and say they love each other, and to have it so negatively impact one person while it feels so good for the other person. Yeah. That's the heart of the issue. How can we get rid of this thing that is tearing her apart and is giving him so much satisfaction that his brain wants to come up with every reason it can to keep it?
Yeah. So back to your question where you were asking me about whether I believe this is a silent killer or relationship enhancer. For those that do believe that it's an enhancer, I just think that the belief systems need to be very carefully evaluated. Where does this belief come from?
Right.
If we have evidence scientifically, and we have a history to look at and current things going on, you can get online on Facebook and go in these addiction groups. There's lots of groups out there for women whose husbands are addicted or whose partners are addicted. And you see pain everywhere. You see divorce everywhere. You see the effects of this. And women pouring their hearts out in these groups about the way it's destroying their families. So if someone can say, oh no, there's nothing wrong with this, it's totally fine.
Yeah.
I just think that it's okay to have that opinion. I just don't want people to make that decision lightly. I don't want them to assume that this is true simply because it's what they've learned is socially the norm, or they haven't done all the research to understand what this is actually doing to families or to their partner's brain. With that being said, that's why I would call it a silent killer, because so many people aren't talking about it, and so many people just make these assumptions based on what people do talk about, which there's plenty of people willing to support it.
Right.
That's being talked about.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of people that are actually speaking up where their lives are negatively being impacted by this.
There's not a lot of safe places when the truth comes out, when all the facts, all the context are put on the table.
It
you
has
can't
no legs to
argue with
stand
it.
on anymore.
There's
Right.
nothing. It's done.
Right.
And people don't like that
don't
because
like
it's
it.
uncomfortable, because it says something about
About them.
themselves
Mhm.
that they now have to change, and that requires effort. But what it doesn't say about them is that they're a terrible person. It doesn't say that they're a terrible husband.
No.
It doesn't say they're a terrible significant other, fiance, boyfriend, girlfriend. What it says is that they got caught in the porn trap.
Right.
They got caught.
Fooled. They got fooled by
They
it.
got tricked.
Mm-hmm.
No one taught them.
Mm-hmm.
And now they've got to figure out, how the hell do I get out of this mess?
Right.
Now, I want you to also share with us a little bit about what it was that you experienced and kind of what your expectations were when I decided that pornography was something that I was no longer going to view as acceptable in our relationship.
Yeah, I was very relieved. I remember having the conversation with you, letting you know that this was something that for me was a deal breaker.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard for me to say that. It was hard for me to bring that up to you and to say that, because I knew the relationship could be over, because we had both agreed previously that it was fine.
Yeah.
But that was also with me being living out of a false version of myself.
Neither one of us had the full context.
Right. And, when I got serious about wanting to see where this would go, I realized, like, this isn't something that makes me feel the way I want to feel.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't something that's bringing me close to you and making me feel close to you. This is something that's hurting me and making me feel more distant from you. And so when you told me, if it's between you or porn, I choose you, those were your exact words to me. And I just remember just feeling so relieved. And I was like, thank God.
Yeah.
Done. Woohoo! We're good.
That was easy.
That was easy. Yeah. Don't have to worry about this anymore.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I felt.
It was relieving, because I was choosing you, but neither one of us actually knew what that battle looked like, or
No,
that
I
it would
didn't.
be a battle.
Right. I was going to say, I didn't know it was even going to be a battle. Because to me, the way I saw it, and I remember telling you this too, was that using pornography was a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I still think that that's a decision. There's a lot more that goes into that decision
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't have any clue until we really dug into the experience of, needing to break this addiction, and why it's not something that you just can
Right.
turn off like that, and understanding the brain and the process that you would need to go through
Right.
to help you not make that decision.
I think that I really want to point something out here. I know that the primary focus on this episode is obviously focusing on the woman, but I don't feel like this is something I included from the man's side. And I think that it's really beneficial for the woman to understand,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes both ways. But when it comes to different labels that we give things, it can take away a lot of the really fundamental understanding and full context of what goes into something. And so something that hurt me throughout our process was the label of it being a decision, because the difficulty of the process for me felt so much more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So it felt very invalidating to the experience that I had.
Yeah.
And I wasn't able to fully communicate what it was that I was even experiencing when we would have some of those talks.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to be sure to include that in this conversation, so that people can be aware that when they're taking things out of the full context of what really goes into this,
Mm-hmm.
then it can really hold back some of the progress that you could otherwise make if you're focusing on the right things, if you know what to be focusing on.
Right. And I had no understanding of, you would tell
Neither
me
of
something.
us really.
you would tell me that that hurt you. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
You know, like it didn't make sense to me why that would hurt you because of my belief that it was just a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And now that, you know, I understand so much more about, like I said, the brain and the process that it actually took for you to break the addiction to this.
Mm-hmm.
Now I get it. Now I get why that was hurtful to you.
Yeah.
And I think it's again, both partners need to be able to express how they feel and be able to tell you tell each other what they're going through and be validated.
Mm-hmm.
It makes total sense why I believed it was just a decision, and why, because I believed it was just a decision that you could just not make, why it was so painful for me, for you to be making this decision over and over after you saw how much it hurt me. And we had all these discussions. I knew that there would be some kind of process, but I had no idea just what kind of process it would really take.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was believing would be the process would be more of the, whatever length of time it would take for you to naturally begin to be sensitized to me again. And, you know, for me, that was hard enough. Like, I was like, he doesn't see me. He's not feeling attraction to me. He's not aroused by me. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to have to be okay with this while I wait for him to feel these things again.
Yeah. How did that compare to your real experience? How did it really happen?
Well, the way it really happened was, it wasn't just like that. And it was a very painful process because there were multiple relapses that happened. And there was different things that were the justifications or the scenarios that prompted those to happen. And I was, you know, I will say again, I was very grateful that you were the one to tell me about these relapses. You came to me and would tell me after reflection exactly what the situation was, what you did, what you learned from that, and, you know, what it was that your brain had done to trick you into believing that this would be okay, or that this actually wasn't pornography and that it was not the same and it was totally fine to do it.
Right.
You know, and it was, though I was so grateful that I wasn't discovering these things, it was still very painful because it's the same thing as, oh, I went back to this other mistress that I told you I wouldn't be with anymore.
Right.
And I cheated on you again. And here's why I convinced myself it was okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that. You know, and it was just,
It was difficult.
it was really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I even look back on those relapses, that in the moment there were different relapses that I viewed as progress. I legitimately saw it as a step forward. And in some ways, you could make that argument. But the biggest core belief that I hadn't changed in those moments, that would have absolutely shown me like, this isn't actually progress. It's you're psychologically being unfaithful to a lesser degree of content, but the actual infidelity is the same.
Right.
And that's the core belief that I was missing, was that psychological infidelity was what it was. That's what it all came down to, was psychological infidelity. And if I would have been able to have understood that and accepted that belief as my own at the beginning of the process, then I think that I could have looked a lot different. I don't know that I still wouldn't have had relapses, but I can say that I would have had a much more stronger emotional attachment to the failures of those relapses. So I do believe that there would have been fewer.
Yeah. And, you know, in some senses it was progress because you learn something every time. But I will say, for people who want to justify, because I think there is some level of wanting to justify the actions by saying, oh, well, at least I'm making progress, at least I'm moving forward. But that takes no account into the fact that it is causing another betrayal trauma for the partner. It is damaging. It is hurtful and painful. And for me personally, it continued to set me back in my process. It continued to make me have to doubt whether I could ever believe that this is going to change, ever believe that I could trust your judgment. And it made me have to seriously consider, is this worth it? This damage to me that I've already been through so much pain. I'm already trying to work on healing from things that are going to take me years. And now add to this, and it's creating PTSD, it's creating anxiety, it's creating mental turmoil for me where I can't be present in my life with my kids. I can't enjoy this relationship I wanted to have with you. Like, it created so much doubt in whether or not I should even continue to stay in the relationship. So I think there's better ways to make progress.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, when it comes to, without having that core belief shift, it's like, well, what's the next justification going to be?
Right, because there's always something.
Unlimited number of perspectives that you can insert in order to justify the behavior, unless your underlying belief is that any amount of psychological infidelity is cheating on my partner. You firmly believe that, and you follow through on your commitment to your partner to not be unfaithful to her in any psychological manner, then you will be successful. You commit to that and you work through it. You're obviously going to still have other things that you're going to get subconscious cues that go against that belief. And it's going to be your job to reprogram them all the way to the end until you're no longer having these strong urges and cravings for pornography or anything of the sort like it.
Right, because it has to be something that comes from you. It can't be that you're just doing this because it hurts your partner and your partner wants you to stop. Like, eventually you're going to end up going back to it if you're not actually changing your belief systems about it.
And I think that's one of the hardest things that I've seen in some of our conversations with people in Facebook groups, is that if the man or whoever the addict is, if they don't want the relationship bad enough with you, then they aren't going to do it. And if they do, then they will.
And unfortunately, women have to have very strong boundaries in place.
So with that being said, what do you think is the hardest thing for women who are with a man who is in the process of quitting but has not yet successfully quit?
That's a loaded question, because there's so many hard things about that. I mean, to just name a few of the things that the woman goes through, we've already talked about some of them. The self-doubt that you have about yourself and the way that you see yourself as not being good enough and needing to compete with these things, trying to determine whether or not you should be even staying in the relationship or whether you should go. How do you be supportive to your partner while also having firm boundaries in place? Those things sometimes feel like they're against each other. The pain that you constantly feel when you think about what it is your partner is struggling with, and the projections of what he's thinking about and what he's feeling in his body when he's having these struggles. I mean, I know for me, I was constantly having these intrusive thoughts about the visuals that I imagined that you saw when you did these things. Or what you were thinking and feeling when we'd be out in public together. Being scared that if I left you alone, that we would be going through another relapse. Every time that you were basically by yourself, whether you were staying in bed longer than I did in the morning, or whether you were going to the bathroom, or whether you were going to work. You know, basically hypervigilance, having constant anxiety about whether you were doing something to betray me again. It was very, very, very difficult.
That's really hard place to be, because you have to know how to work through those different episodes of anxiety. You have to be able to focus on the right things that are going to help you as the partner to be able to adopt the correct belief systems that you need, so that you don't continue to experience those things in the future, so that you can get rid of those. And
Because you can't function.
And without the man doing his part, then they'll never go away.
Right.
They'll always be there.
You're wasting, to me, it feels like you're wasting life, because you can't fully live your life when you're feeling these things.
Right. I think a lot of the experiences that you just described for different situations that you would feel a lot of anxiety, that there's partners out there who are with an addict who are going to be able to relate with that. Can you share with them a little bit more about what you feel like it was that helped you to be able to decrease the number of times that you are exposed to those feelings, or what helped you make the progress to not be cued by those things as much?
Yeah, I definitely would say that these are PTSD experiences, because post-traumatic stress disorder is where you've gone through a traumatic event, and due to that trauma, you have hypervigilance. Right. You have fear that this is going to happen again.
And most likely, in most cases, probably multiple traumas in this scenario.
We're talking about multiple traumas, exactly.
Right.
And if you're talking about multiple traumas over a span of years, then it's even something deeper called complex trauma. And you know, how do you lessen the effects of that, or having those things, those triggers? That would be a whole episode in itself that I would like to do. But you know, the truth of it is that if you're still in a relationship with somebody who's continuing to relapse over and over, and they're not doing the work, you won't heal. Right. You won't have these things decrease, because your brain is understandably on purpose. It's needing to protect you.
Right.
And that's what hypervigilance is. It's where your brain says, it's a natural response to danger. It says, I'm not safe. And how do I make sure I'm not going to be put through the same trauma again?
I need to protect myself.
Correct. And that, I would say, is what my brain has had to eventually, over time, decrease its need to protect itself. And so what I appreciated so much about our process was that somehow you got that from the start. You never made me feel bad for having to check in with you quite a bit at the beginning. And that's one of the answers I would say, is that it helped a lot to be able to come to you when I was having triggers and fears, and check in with you and ask you, this is what I'm thinking right now. Is this true?
Yeah.
This is what I'm fearing right now. Is this something that I need to worry about? You know, and it makes it sound like I was so calm and collected, but a lot of the time I came to you, I'd be in tears, and I would be really upset because I felt like I maybe was wrong for feeling the way I felt, and I hated it. And I hated that I felt like I might drive you away by me asking you all the time.
Yeah.
And that's just, you know, unfortunately, that's part of the process. And men need to understand that there's a reason that women are feeling this way. Right. They are not choosing it. It's not something they have a lot of control over.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things that was hard for me, where really, as we're talking about like part of the process, that's a time when the man really has to step up, because having those conversations can be difficult when it comes to the types of thoughts that begin to go through their head, because there's a lot of times when I may not even be thinking about something anymore, and you would come to me with a way that you were feeling, and now it's bringing those things back. Yeah. And so it's like,
which is the last thing we want.
Could be. But at the same time, it's also giving the man another opportunity to make the right decisions again, to reinforce the decision-making habit of, what am I going to do when I get these different thoughts? Yeah. How am I going to rationalize through them? And the experience of having the woman come and talk to them about whatever it is that they're going through can actually also be beneficial to the man from that perspective.
Yeah,
But it doesn't feel like it in the moment. It feels like I don't want to, this isn't what I want going through my head right now, but it does help.
Yeah.
When you're making the right choices, it does help.
Yeah.
But if you're making the wrong choices, then it's going to hurt you.
Right. That's such a healthy perspective to have. And I really appreciate that you said that, because I think a partner that really cares about their relationship and cares about their partner and cares about their process and their recovery, if they understand this, that the repetitions of needing to be in charge of their mindset and in charge of what they do with certain things that come into their thoughts,
right.
Then their response to their partner will look a lot different than somebody, like you said, who's wanting to continue the behavior and doesn't want to be confronted or held accountable to the things that they're actually doing. And back to, the answer about how did I lessen the effects of the PTSD symptoms? It was really time, permission, giving myself permission to feel these things. I went to therapy, and I remember my therapist saying, validating the way I was feeling and trying to tell me, don't rush the process of building trust, because trust is so quickly broken and takes so much time to rebuild. And that's the way it should be. Meaning you shouldn't trust without reason to trust. And so it takes time and evidence of the actions of your partner that's going to help you build that trust back. And it's okay to feel on guard until that trust is earned again. So I think that's really important for women to hear.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would say helped me was that, when we would have these conversations where, because I had a partner who was really doing the work, who really cared about me, who really didn't want to have this addiction, when you were making progress in your recovery, you told me about the details of that progress. You gave me a lot of information about what you were going through and the thoughts you were having, the aha moments you were experiencing. You also had a lot of really kind, loving things to say to me, which, because I was a mess, I felt like a mess from all of the pain and the anxiety, and I felt like I was going crazy a lot of the time. And I felt like, again, like when I would come to you with these things over and over and over, I felt like I might drive you away. And the way you reassured me and helped me know that you weren't seeing me as crazy, or that that you still loved me, that you still cared about me and how I was feeling. I would write down these conversations in a journal after they happened, especially the ones that were so meaningful to me. And when I left the conversation feeling really loved by you and reassured, I would write them down. And then when I was feeling anxious, a lot of times literally the very next day, even after I went to bed that night feeling so comforted and so much better, the next day, right back where I started.
Right.
It was as if the conversation hadn't happened. And it made me angry. Like I was angry at myself. Like, why wasn't that good enough for me?
Yeah.
And then, of course, back to the whole point I just made, that my therapist made, there's a reason for that. There's a reason that my brain is doing this. So, but what I would do is I would go back and I would reread the conversation we had so that I could remind myself of all the truth. Because your anxiety is projections of the future. And it's also basing it on experiences from the past. So, of course, my brain is taking truth from the past and projecting what may happen in the future, which isn't truth. It's not for sure. My anxious thoughts don't predict the future.
Right.
So when I would ground myself in things that I knew to be true, which is the actions you were showing me and the comfort you were providing me and the aha moments you were experiencing, that was my grounding for the truth, my actual reality. So I was trying to train my brain to base my projections on the reality of where I was currently, and yet give myself permission to be in process until I fully felt safe.
So based on your experiences, what would you say is the difference between someone who is actually changing versus somebody who is wanting to give the appearance that they're changing?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think really important to talk about, because that's the question a lot of women are asking.
Yeah.
Is he really going to
Doing the work.
change? Is he really doing the work?
Yeah.
And, I've had experience seeing both.
Mhm.
In my past relationship, the experience was that he said he was going to change,
Mhm.
but he put a lot of the responsibility on me in order for him to change.
Okay.
So he asked me to do things so that would make him more inspired to be different.
Mhm.
He required me to be doing things to make it easier for him to be able to change.
Mhm.
And when I would approach him with the things that were really hard and painful for me, he didn't want to talk about those things because he felt a lot of shame.
Right.
And that was different. I think shame is very different than remorse or compassion.
Right.
Shame doesn't equal remorse or compassion. Shame is very much about the person themselves.
Mhm.
And shame makes you run away. Shame makes you feel defensive. It makes you need to protect yourself from feeling it because it's not a productive feeling. It doesn't help you become better because you're really not taking responsibility or being able to admit where you need to make some changes.
Mhm.
So then later, as time went on, he just said he had changed.
Mhm.
And yet my relationship with him wasn't any better. I wasn't feeling closer. I wasn't feeling loved. And I hadn't seen him actually put in any effort or work to make that change happen. He just claimed that he had changed.
Mhm.
And therefore, I shouldn't bring it up anymore.
Yeah.
So I couldn't bring it up in the beginning because he wasn't ready yet to be a changed person because I hadn't done the things I needed to do in order for him to be able to be changed.
Mhm.
And then I couldn't bring it up later because it was in the past and wasn't something that I should be bringing up anymore because he had changed.
So how much depth was there to his ability to really expand on the different types of changes that he went through and what it took in order to go through those changes? What kind of depth was there to that type of conversation?
Those conversations didn't happen. There was no depth to the process that he was going through. And that's the difference. From what I experienced with you, I was able to see that when a man is actually making changes, his actions and his words match. And he's able to self-evaluate. He's able to take responsibility. He's able to show compassion. He's actually doing work that it takes to make those changes happen. For example, you were reading books, you were listening to podcasts, you were having daily conversations with me that sometimes lasted hours.
Yeah.
I don't know how you did that. It was exhausting. The work you were doing was exhausting and it was obsessive.
The majority of the work was happening even when I wasn't around you too, because all of the different thoughts and cues that a man gets, he spends the majority of his time away from the home if he's working. And so I'm on the road at that point in our relationship 8 to 10 hours a day and internally processing everything. And so that experience, those thoughts, that's the communication that you're having with your partner later, like to be able to really show them like, this is what I went through today. This is how I experienced my thoughts. This is what I combated it with. And this is my belief. This is what I want. Here's what pushed me away from the pain. Here's what took me towards what I actually want. And to do that day in and day out consistently over time and to be able to share those experiences with your partner.
Right.
That is an extraordinary large amount of work.
It sure is. And
that's the work that needs to be shared with the partner. As you're talking about these conversations, it seems like it's just like a 1 or a 2 hour thing. This is on top of your full day of taking whatever thought processes that you had to go through and to handle them in the right way in order to move your relationship forward.
Right. And the reason why it takes that much work is because you're literally rewiring your brain.
Right. So earlier in our conversation, you mentioned that in your previous relationship, you tried to use pornography in order to enhance the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, as you mentioned earlier, those things didn't work.
Right.
Now, I'm curious to know, when it comes to trust, exclusivity, unique bond, emotional closeness, and attachment, now that pornography is not part of your relationship, has there been any changes that you've seen in any of those areas?
Absolutely. 100%. I would definitely say that not having pornography in our relationship has made me able to trust you a lot more. I feel much closer to you. I feel like I can trust my reality is my reality. I'm not having to constantly compare myself to an ideal or feel like I'm being compared to an ideal. I feel like I'm able to be myself and that you actually are seeing me, and I know that you're noticing me a lot more. That's obvious, it feels really good.
Likewise.
And, I do feel like it's more you and me against the world, kind of that feeling of this is something that's unique to us, that we're exclusive and it's special. It's definitely giving me a lot more of the relationship that I always dreamt of having by not having that a part of the relationship. Absolutely.
It's really great to hear. And I can say from my side that I feel completely the same way. And I love that I'm feeling more attracted to you now, even than I was at the beginning of our relationship.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's definitely a positive thing. I know that you're really hard on yourself and you're like, I was in better shape when we first met.
Right.
And for me, it's just like, without pornography in my life, I am able to see you in a way that I never was able to see you back then.
That's pretty amazing.
It's very powerful. I'm so grateful to be where I am today.
I am grateful as well. It's an understatement.
Now, what advice do you have for any women who are out there and they're trying to make a tough call? They're trying to decide whether or not they should stay in a relationship when they have a partner who's addicted to pornography. What would you suggest to them?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge you never signed up to be a part of. It's really difficult, especially because I believe that probably the majority of women who are watching this, their partners weren't as forthright and honest about it as you were with me. My guess is that most of them are likely experiencing, betrayal trauma because they believed they were exclusive and getting to have their partner's full commitment and faithfulness, and then discovering that that's not the reality they've been living in. And that's really, really, really difficult. So to be able to know, do I stay in this relationship or do I get out because I'm, it's either you don't know if you can recover, you don't know if you can trust them ever again. It's a really, really tough call. And I think that, and I would never have the audacity to say that here's what you should do, or here's the answer, you should go, or you should stay. It's really up to every single person's individual situation and what they believe is right for them. But I do think that there's some questions that I would recommend that they ask themselves when trying to come to the right conclusion for their lives. And I think that the first question would be, kind of starting from the beginning of, do my partner and I see this issue? Are we seeing eye to eye on this issue? Like, does my partner also believe that this is a problem? At the beginning of our discovery process, that, when I came to you and I said to you that this was a deal breaker for me,
Mm-hmm.
You know, you had to process for yourself whether you believe this was also a deal breaker for you. And
Right.
you did tell me, you know, if it's between you or porn, I choose you.
Right.
But yet it wasn't necessarily because you saw eye to eye with me about it. And so in order for you to fully make the decision to do the work to get rid of this,
Mm-hmm.
I know you did a lot of research kind of on your own to understand, is this just her opinion?
Right.
Or is this actually something I believe that's harmful as well?
Yeah.
And so I think that, you know, when women are trying to figure out what to do from here, once there's been discovery of this, you know, that's really the first question is, do you and your partner see eye to eye on this issue?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, is he willing to do an evaluation to see if he can get eye to eye with where you're at on how you feel about it? Because,
Right.
you know, truthfully, if you've got one partner who it doesn't work for them and the other partner, it's totally fine, it's going to be very difficult to have a real relationship with that.
Yeah.
And to have this actually be an addiction that can be overcome. So both partners need to be on the same page. So then I think the second question that a woman needs to ask then is, okay, you know, if my partner does see eye to eye with me on this and they are really caring about the way this makes me feel,
Mm-hmm.
they don't want this to be an issue in their lives together, then is my partner actually willing to do the work it's going to take to break this addiction?
Yeah.
So that's really the next question for evaluation is, you know, is he willing to do what it's going to take? Because it's not easy. It's a hard road.
Yeah.
And you can't just say that you're willing to change. You
Right.
have to actually do the work it's going to take to change. Without women drawing really strong boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, a lot of men are enabled to stay the same.
Definitely. Yes.
And they need those strong boundaries in order to have a reason to do the really hard work it's going to take to change.
Mm-hmm.
If a woman is putting up with relapse after relapse after relapse, and she's not able to draw a strong boundary and say, look, this is not going to work
Mm-hmm.
for me. Unfortunately, they're signing up for likely a lifetime of the same.
Right.
So I think a woman needs to ask, you know, several questions here as I think about, you know, you asked me what advice I would have for women who are going through this. You know, another question is, are the words and actions aligning from my partner? Is he just saying he's willing to change, or is he actually doing the steps and the work to produce the changes?
Mm-hmm.
Because as we talked about before, you know, I know what it's like when someone says that they're going to change.
Yeah.
And I know what it looks like when somebody's actually doing the work it takes to make really difficult changes.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to have to be putting a lot of effort in. And I think a woman needs to be able to see that effort to know if this is a relationship that could possibly work or not. And then after that, I think the next question is the work he's doing actually making improvements? Is he showing progress? Is it working or not? And if it's not, is he willing to change what he's doing to make sure that it is working and guarantee her safety and staying in the relationship? And then when he's doing that work, is he being open and vulnerable with her about the process he's going through? Because once again, you know, she's not able to read his mind. She's not a part of his mind. So she's going through a ton of turmoil inside, wanting to believe that things are changing, wanting to believe that he's not allowing these thoughts to continue, not allowing the cravings to take over, not, you know, that he's doing the work he needs to do to be faithful to her in his mind. And unless he's actually talking about the aha moments and the things that are helping him make sense of what has happened so far to this point, and, you know, what he needs to do differently and what he's learning and where he's growing and where he's changing, unless he's open and vulnerable with her, she won't know any of this. And it's very hard for her to trust that the changes are actually happening.
Yeah. It really has to stand the test of time, and for the woman to be able to witness a significant number of changes that have occurred and to be able to see that consistently.
Yeah, consistency is huge. It's not just, putting on the act for a while. No, we're talking like a long term,
Right.
Being able to have these conversations day in and day out for a very long time. Unfortunately, when you're rewiring the brain, that's what it takes.
Yeah.
That's what it takes. And then I think the obvious question too is, is my partner lying and deceiving me over and over?
Yeah.
Because that's a sign of somebody that's not actually wanting to change.
Right.
That's a sign of somebody who wants to put on the appearance of change, but not actually be changing.
Yeah.
So that right there, I think, is a pretty big red flag.
And from your own experience, is there anything that you can notice specifically? Like, what would you be looking out for in terms of somebody who is continuously lying versus somebody that you feel is actually being honest with you?
I think that somebody that's lying isn't going into a lot of detail. They're saying everything's fine. They're probably deflecting, changing the subject. They're not wanting to have a lot of in-depth conversation. Yeah, I think that it's more of a
Very
uncomfortable. It's superficial. Yeah, it's an uncomfortable thing to be talking about it when they know deep down that they're actually not being honest. So they'll try to avoid the conversations.
I want to thank you so much for sharing with everyone today, and thank you for your vulnerability, for your ability to show your emotions, to be able to relate to other people on that level, to show them that this isn't just something that you can have a conversation about. This is something that is very emotionally draining for a lot of women out there. And those women out there are really needing hope, I believe.
Yeah.
So are there any final words that you have for them, for what they can look forward to?
I do have some final things to say, and I would say to them, hang in there. I know it seems like this is going to feel this way forever, but one way or another, it's going to change. And I pray that that's going to change because you're with the right person who loves you and cares about you and is willing to do the work that it takes to prove it to you. Or it's going to change because you're not with the right person and you're going to figure that out.
Yeah.
And you're going to move forward eventually. Is it going to be hard? Hell yeah, it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
It's going to be the hardest thing you've probably ever done. I know what that's like. I know what both is like. I've had both experiences and they're both hard, but know that it will get better. Know that you're not going to be in this place forever feeling this pain. You have to hang in there, and you've got to do the work too on yourself to be able to make those hard decisions.
Yeah.
And rebuild the relationship if it is the right relationship for you.
Katie, thank you so much for joining me on this journey. It is an absolute pleasure to be doing life with you. And I know that there's plenty of other couples out there who have so much to look forward to because of people like you who are willing to share your story. Thank you for being a source of inspiration and of hope. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you got a lot out of today's episode, please go ahead and like and subscribe. If you're looking for more free content, if you're looking for help, if you and your partner are trying to navigate this journey, go ahead and click the link in the description below. Katie and I literally are just launching our brand new group in Facebook, and we're looking to help people who are trying to navigate their addictions with porn, trying to help them end that so that they can rebuild a real relationship.
Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next episode.